Good evening, everyone. We are here with Jonah, who is from, and what was that again? OSU?
Ohio State University, Ross County Extension Office. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
All right. And what are we making today?
We are going to kind of go off the beaten path and make some homemade refried beans and homemade tortillas. They're a little labor intensive, like I was just telling Rachel a minute ago, but they are a lot of fun, and this is a good family recipe to get the kids involved as well. Um, I think you'll enjoy them.
All right. Let's see.
Okay, so if you want to go ahead and just put that first slide up, Rachel,
All
so I
right.
can give everybody the lowdown. I mean, I think most everybody knows my name's Johnna, and I am an employee of the Ohio SNAP Ed program through the Ohio State University and the Ross County Extension Office. And I'm going to be talking about for this series how to make My Plate work for you. And this here's a little picture of our My Plate, and I'll go a little more in depth here on the next slide. But back to it, just want to plug in my little websites there to go to as far as you can do this on the app or you can do it on actual website for celebrateyourplate.org or myplate.gov. Both great websites to go to for nutrition information as well as some fresh new recipes when you just want to change things up a little bit. There you go, Rachel. Thank you. So the next one is just the picture of the My Plate, and I want to talk a little bit about what the recommendations are as what we should have as far as the 5 food groups. Now, I'm just giving the adult recommendations here, but usually if you kind of cut these in half, you're going to have for not a toddler, but for just a 9, 10, 11, 12 year old. So cut it in half for children. So as you can see there, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables, and that means about 2 cups daily and about 2.5 cups daily of fruits and vegetables. And they can be any combination. I mean, it's not like you have to have so many greens, so many yellows, so many different colors. If you can just make a combination of the two, so you're getting about 4.5 to 5 cups of fruits and vegetables daily, you're going to be meeting your daily requirements. And then a quarter there in the orange section is going to be our grains, and that's going to be our pastas, our breads, our oatmeals, our rices. And of those 6 ounce equivalents, and I'll just go into that in a little bit, equivalents, you should have half of those being whole grains. So that means if you have white rice and brown rice, to get half of your grains to be whole grains, you're going to want to go with that brown rice because it's going to be a whole grain. It hasn't been processed. Instead of white bread, you're going to want to use whole wheat bread. So what's an ounce equivalent? It's not an ounce for ounce. It's kind of like the different servings of different things. So like one slice of bread is an ounce equivalent. A half a cup of brown rice is an ounce equivalent. So it's not the actual measurements exact as far as weight. It's going to be equivalent of what those ounces are going to be for your daily needs. So, okay, if we need six equivalents daily, if you have and you want half of them to be whole grains. So if you have one sandwich with two pieces of whole grain bread, there's going to be 2 ounce equivalents of your daily requirements. So you've already met almost half of your grains being whole for the day. So it's not really that hard to do. And then protein, that's going to be our meats. That's going to be chicken, beef, pork, fish. And then there's plant-based proteins, beans, lentils, nuts, peanut butter, seeds, that type of thing. Need about 5.5 ounces daily, which is not a lot. You guys always have heard me say that the palm of your hand is about the size of a 4 ounce serving of meat. So if you think about look at the palm of your hand and think about that last chicken breast you had, you've probably had your 5.5 ounces daily protein just in one chicken breast. So it's not really hard to get that in as well. And then the blue there is our dairy. That's going to be our milks, our cheeses, our yogurts. And that's something else that's really easy to get in because just about everything in the American diet is going to have some form of yogurt or cheese in it anymore. So 3 cups a day, need it for our daily calcium intake, and try to keep those low fat, no fat. And the one thing I put on there too is to keep in perspective that we should only have around 27 grams of fats a day. And that is something that's really prevalent in our diets is a lot of fat. And the way we monitor those is by looking at the labels on the back of our food and just try to keep track how many per serving you're having. So, like for example, I've got a pack of cheese sitting here beside me, and 1/4 cup is a serving, and of that, there are 6 grams of fat. So 27 grams of fat is really quick, really easy to get into our diet. So we have to really be careful with that. Okay, Rachel, if you want to go ahead and come back to me, we'll go ahead and get started with these recipes today. The first one we're going to start off with is the refried beans, and these will be in the chat box so you guys can print those off. This one is really super simple. The ingredients are going to consist of 1 can of pinto beans. Try to get the no salt added if you can. If not, rinse them. A little bit of garlic powder or whole garlic if you have it on hand. I got the powder today. A little bit of ground cumin, which is something most of us have always in our pantry, and then just a couple of tablespoons of onion. So I'm going to start off by chopping up my onion. Actually, I'm going to get my pan heated up here and get some oil going, about 2 tablespoons of oil. It calls for just oil, so my oil of preference is my olive oil. So let me go ahead and get that in the pan. You're going to fly across the room here with me. And I've got my burner on low. So just about a tablespoon of olive oil, corn oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, whatever your oil of preference is. I tend to do everything in olive oil. Okay, so back to our onion. I've just got a small onion here, and I'm going to just cut the bad end off of it there. Get that, throw it out of the way. And I'm going to chop this in half so we got a flat surface. And then I'm just going to mince this onion up and get it into small pieces. We're going to mash this up with our beans, so they don't have to be perfect, but try to get them small so they cook up pretty quickly. And we're just going to saute these up in this olive oil as it heats up. And then we're just going to mash in beans. And that's, like I said, these recipes are really fun for kids. Older kids around the stove, obviously. You're not going to have toddlers doing this, but it's really super easy to do. And the really good thing about making your own refried beans is you're going to control the fat content. If you look at the label of a lot of the canned refried beans that we buy in the store, you're going to see sometimes that they have things, I've even seen some cans say they have lard in them. And lard is just pure saturated fat, so we don't want to do that. Okay, so let's come back over here to the stove. We're going to toss these onions in our pan, and this is just a medium-sized saucepan. Is all I've got here. And hopefully these start sizzling, and they did just as quickly as I put them in here. It's going to take just a couple minutes for those to brown up. Now I'm going to take my can of beans here. Like I said, this is regular brown pinto beans. It's all they are. If I turn the label the right way and get my hand off of it. I'm going to drain these real quick in the sink. Get this liquid off of them. And all we're going to do with these guys is we're going to put these beans in with these onions once they're sauteed up, and then add in our seasoning and mash them up. And they don't have to be perfectly, smooth. Now, if you want them that way, you can take them out of the pan once you have them all mashed up and warmed up with the seasoning in them, put them through a food processor or a blender and make them smooth. I personally like mine with little chunks in them. So let's move back over here to the stove. A lot of back and forth on this recipe today. Now I'm just going to take my spatula, move my onions around. They're already starting to get like a clear, opaque look to them. And that's how you know that they're cooking down really good. All right, got that taken care of. Now I'm going to take these beans. I'm going to dump them in the pan here with my onions. The last 2 beans never want to come out of the can. Go figure. All right, then I'm going to take my ground cumin, and the recipe calls for 1/4 teaspoon of that. So you want to make sure it's a nice leveled off spoonful. I'm going to throw that in the pan. And then I've got my powdered garlic, same thing, 1/4 teaspoon, level, dump that in. And then, this is the fun part. I'm going to take my good old handy dandy potato masher, and I'm just going to start mashing these beans in. And you're going to mash them until they have the consistency of a refried bean. And that's all you do, guys. These beans are just as good. Actually, I like them better because they have more flavor. With the cumin and the garlic, it's going to give you a lot of flavor. And you don't have all the extra, like I said, there's no fat additives. That olive oil is a good, healthy, protein-based fat, so it's going to be something that your body can process a lot easier. And you see they're getting pretty smooth. I'm just going to keep mashing. You don't even have to really cook these for any length of time other than just sauteing the onion and getting the beans mashed down, because they're just going to blend. All they do when they make refried beans in the restaurants is they just mash them in just like this, and then they cook them and get them worked together. Now, some of the restaurants, I mean, I have seen some that will use a powdered bean, which is the reason you get those really super, super smooth refried beans in the restaurants. Not me. I'm not doing that. Okay, so there we go. You can make them even smoother if you want, but I am good with that one. So I'm going to set those off to the side. And then we're going to move on. I got my griddle there ready for these tortillas. Okay, now these are a little labor intense, okay? And they do take a little bit of time. So let me get this cutting board out of the way. I'm going to use just a regular large size cutting board. We're going to start off. Our recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, or we're going to do a whole grain version of these. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and actually 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour and a half cup of whole wheat flour, which is going to put that whole grain into our diet. Teaspoon of baking powder, a little bit of salt, which actually I'm going to leave out, and then some more vegetable oil, which I'm going to use olive oil, and a little bit of warm water. That's all thin tortillas. Go figure, huh? They look really complicated when you're looking at them. So I'm starting off with my mixing bowl. If you're in the market for some mixing bowls, try to find the ones that have got these little rubber bands on the bottom. They really are great. They don't slide around that way. And we're going to start off by measuring out 1.5 cups. I am noisy today. 1.5 cups of just the all-purpose white flour. And when you're measuring flours or anything like this, you want to make sure that you're pouring them into the measuring cup and not scooping, because sometimes when you scoop, you will pack it and you'll wind up getting more of a product in your recipe than what you want to. So you see, I just take the side of it, level it off. There's 1 cup. Dump in for the 1/2 cup. You always want to make sure you're leveling it off. That way you know you're getting accurate measurements. 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And then this canister's got my whole wheat flour in it. And I lost my scooper. So you're going to do the same thing. Going to measure out 1/2 cup of the whole wheat flour. And I don't know if you guys can see the difference in the colors. A lot of people will wonder, what's the difference? Whole grain flours, obviously, they have got the entire grain. They have not removed any of the part of the grain. But when you pour them side by side, sometimes you can see the difference. Yeah, the brown of the whole wheat versus the white of the all-purpose. So you've got the whole grain in there. All right, and then we're going to add in just a teaspoon of baking powder. This is what's going to make them fluff up when we put them on the griddle. Same deal, measuring it out flat. So there's our baking powder in there. I better put the lid on this jar of cumin because I am famous for spilling stuff. Hang on. Okay, and then we're going to take a fork, and I'm just going to blend these together to make sure that you get that baking powder stirred in and mixed in really well with all your flour. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of oil to this. So again, with the olive oil, measuring out 1, and I'm just going to kind of just spread this around over top of the flour, so because I'm going to work this clear through this flour, and it's going to make kind of a grainy type batter mixture. Okay, like that. So I'm just going to start taking my fork and mixing, and then start doing this, running this fork through this, like, I don't know if any of you have ever used a pastry blender if you're making like a pie crust, but you want to blend this oil in, and it's going to just keep, I get really messy. It's just going to kind of keep blending together until you're going to wind up with a mixture that's consistency of almost like crumbled up graham crackers, if that would make sense. And once you get that worked in, you can actually use a pastry blender if you have one. I just always use a fork. It's just as easy. I'm real simple when it comes to my kitchen utensils. I try to keep them as simple and actually as cost effective as possible. But if you can see how it kind of looks kind of grainy once you work all that oil in there. All right, so I've got that blended together. And all that flour that I mixed out on my board, that's fine, because we're going to throw more flour on that board because we're going to knead these together here in just a second. Okay, so then once I'm done doing that, I've got some hot water. Well, not really hot water. It is water that is supposed to be, what does the temperature say, 105 to 110 degrees, which actually is probably about what most people's tap water is. So I'm going to add this in a couple tablespoons at a time, just like I did the oil. Just spread it out around there. And you're going to use most of that water, but you want to add it in a little at a time so you can blend it in with your flour mixture. And see, it even starts blending even more. Okay, and then a couple more tablespoons, just doing the same thing, just dumping it in the bowl and then mixing. And you're going to wind up with a kind of a crumbly ball once we're done doing all of this. Okay. And you, like I said, you will use most of that water. And once you make these a few times, if you know you're good with that and you know it's going to set up the way you want to, you can go ahead and dump that whole thing of water in. But until you get used to making these, you may want to add it a little bit at a time, just to make sure you don't get too much water. Because if you add too much water, then you got to add more flour. And when you start adding more flour, then you're going to wind up with an unbalanced mixture. And your baking powder is not going to be enough in there to make them rise. Let me turn on the burner for our stove here, because we want to get our griddle good and hot.
And
Okay?
how do you know if you've used too much water?
It will be wet and sticky. So you want this to be kind of a dry, crumbly mixture versus having like a noodle dough. And you see how it's working together there? You see how it's still kind of crumbly? If it's too sticky, you're not going to be able to roll it out and make your little tortillas out of it, because we're going to make little balls out of this. And then, once you go as far as you can with your fork, you got to do what Grandma always did. You got to get your hands in there and really get to mixing. So, and this is just about right. This feels nice and warm with the warm water, and it's starting to hold together pretty good. And you're just going to squeeze until you get all your flour dough mixed in there. You just kind of push and roll. Okay. A little bit more and I'll have it all together. And if it's too dry and it doesn't clump together, then you can always add just a little bit more. You might want to start adding like a teaspoon of water at a time instead of adding a tablespoon. That way you don't take a chance of putting too much in. Okay. So I've got my crumbly little ball here, right? So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to, the recipe says to break it up into 10 little balls. Well, actually, I'm going to knead this down just a little bit more. Get it mixed together good. If you've ever made pizza crust, it's kind of the same process, only your dough is a little more crumbly. All right, so I got this worked together pretty good, and I'm just going to pull this off into balls about, if you want like a standard size tortilla, you're going to want to make them so they're about the size, this is about a 2.5-inch ball, okay? And I'm going to break these up into equal parts. And they don't have to be perfect, and they're not going to be sticking together really good because the dough is kind of a dry dough. So I'm going to get about 6 tortillas out of this batch. I still have some that I didn't in the bowl there. So there we go. All right, so I'm going to drop these back into the bowl, keep one out. I'm going to spread a little bit of flour on my cutting board here. Not a little bit. We'll actually put enough on there because you're going to roll these out with a rolling pin. That's a little too much flour. Let's get that. There we go. And just smash them out with your hand until you've got a nice circle. And then take a little flour up your rolling pin, and start rolling. And you're going to want to rotate these around so you can keep that circular shape. If y'all can see what I'm doing there. And it takes a little practice to get these to the point where they will be nice and round. I'll tell you, it took me a couple times to get them. This first one is not going to roll out really well, I can tell you right now. And I've got my griddle heating up now. So what you do is after you roll one out and you get it to the right thickness, you put it on the griddle, and then while it's cooking, you will roll out the next one. So it's like a process. You make your own little assembly line. And you want to get these pretty thin because they got enough baking powder in them that they're going to fluff up. Okay. And get some of that flour off of there. So you can see how thin that is. It's probably, it's paper thin. You can almost see through it. So I'm going to grab you and take you over here again. And we're just going to put this on the griddle. And we're going to let it set there. Okay? Really can't see that on that white griddle, can you? So while that one's cooking up, we'll come back over and we'll roll out the next one. Same process. This one will hopefully be prettier. That first one wasn't very round. So you smash it out until you've got a nice round tortilla. And I'm just going to start rolling it out. Take it around, roll it out. And always keep an eye on one eye in the back of your head on your griddle because it's going to brown up over there and you're going to flip it over once it browns out some. Oh yeah, this one's rolling out a whole lot better than the first one. I don't know what it is about the first of everything. The first pancake's never good. That first one is like your trial. All right, so there we go. It's stretching out pretty good. And however big you roll them out is just about the same size as your tortilla. So they're not really going to shrink up a whole lot. They'll keep about the same size and shape as when you put them on the griddle. Okay, so there's that. All right, let's see how this one's doing over here. Okay. Let me turn up my heat just a little bit. And you'll know when they're starting to brown up really good because you'll get little brown dots on them, just like the ones you buy in the store. So we're going to let this one cook for just a few minutes. Had to turn the heat up a little bit, had it down a little low. So while we're waiting on that to do that, just a few quick points about things as far as getting your food groups in, as far as my plate. So a good thing to do is to try to average out 3 food groups per meal. So with this one here, we're going to have beans, which is our protein. We're going to have whole grains, which is our tortilla. And then I've got some shredded lettuce and some tomatoes to put on there and some low-fat cheese, which is going to be our veggies and our dairy. So we're actually getting 4 with this meal here. So always make sure you're trying to get at least 3 per meal. Breakfast, you can have a bowl of oatmeal as your whole grains. You can put some fruit on that, it's a fruit, and then have a glass of milk, there's your dairy. There's a really well-balanced breakfast. You're having 3 food groups. And then strive to be low-fat, low sugar, low salt. And we do that by looking at our labels. Go for your natural sugars with your fruits. So instead of putting sugar or brown sugar on that oatmeal in the morning, throw on a handful of strawberries. That's going to make sure that you're getting enough fruit in there without the added sugar. And then use your plant-based proteins, which is going to help with keeping that fat down. This, like I said, with these refried beans we've made tonight, very low in fat. Only fat that's really in there is going to be that little bit of olive oil that we put in, so not bad at all on that part. So, okay, so if you want to go back, Rachel, they're starting to bubble just a little bit. You can see these bubbles popping up on your tortillas here. And then when I flip it over, it's still not turning brown. First ones never work out. I don't know why I try that. And then, okay, so back to more on our my plate. It is try to, we talked about using the bread, the whole grain. So 2 slices of bread is your equivalent for your whole grains. And then making your own, like we're doing tonight, you are able to control the ingredients, what's going to be in your tortillas here. I didn't put the salt in. I have people in my family who have high blood pressure, so we have to watch the salt. By leaving that out, I'm still going to get these great tortillas, but I'm not going to have the problem having the added salt in there. And then one good thing to try to get everybody in your family to do is to try new foods every week. So, maybe you don't like a certain vegetable, but you haven't tried it for a long time. So try it again. Maybe you don't like broccoli, but you haven't tried it for a couple of years. Try it again. You never know. Your taste buds might have changed. And then you also can get more fruits and vegetables into your diet by adding them into. You can throw some shredded carrots into macaroni and cheese. You can throw broccoli into macaroni and cheese, and there you go. If you use whole grain pasta, cheese is your dairy, and then adding the broccoli in there, you got your vegetables. So you can always add things in that way. And then what else was I lost my train of thought there, guys. Okay, I tried put the new tortilla on, and this one's going to work out better. It's already bubbling up. And it's already browning up. And it's just like a tortilla. Talking about the salt, I do have a package of tortillas here that are store-bought. And I'm looking at the ingredient label on the back of it, and it says that there are 510 milligrams of sodium in one of these tortillas. When I looked up the recipe that I'm using off of my plate for these tortillas, there is 166 grams of sodium in this recipe, and that is with the added salt that the recipe called for that I didn't put in. So there's no salt in these, and they're going to taste just as good as what they would. I've tried these before, and they're really good. So flip it over one more time. Now, the one thing is they do not wrap really well for burritos, I'll warn you. They're good for like a soft taco, but they're not so great for a burrito because they don't wrap very well. They're not quite as pliable, probably because they don't have any extra oils or anything in them like the ones in the restaurants do or what we buy in the store. But these are looking really good. Let me grab a plate up here, and we will plate this up. All right, let me bring you back over here. I've got flour all over this computer, guys. I'm messy. What can I say? All right, so I'll move my spatula. Okay, there you go. You can see the little brown dots on it, just like I said you could see on, like just on the regular burrito. That's hot. Tortillas you buy in the store. So I've got my tortilla here. I've got my refried beans, and I'm going to use my little spatula here. Let me stir those up just a little bit more. So put the refried bean on there just like that. I'm going to take the griddle off the fire. I've got my low-fat cheese. And you just need a very little sprinkle on there, probably about maybe half a tablespoonful. I've got some diced up tomatoes here. And then I have my shredded lettuce. And then you just fold this up. And you've got a nice homemade taco there, guys. I normally would put some Greek yogurt on or some sour cream, but I got in the refrigerator to get it out, and lo and behold, I didn't have any Greek yogurt in the house. So that was put on hold. But they're really good. I could have actually put way more filling on that because that's a pretty good size taco shell there. You can use these for burritos, I guess, if you take them off, because this is still pretty pliable right now. But if you make them ahead of time, they get a little stiff, so they don't make the greatest burritos. But they're really good, and they're really fun to make. Get the kids working the dough, rolling it out. And I wish that this would have gone a little smoother tonight, because for some reason it just didn't go as smooth as it did I made them the other day. They were really good. So, what do you think, Rachel? Would you think you could have this for dinner?
Oh, absolutely. It looks, I mean, I am so impressed that you could put that together like so, to me, so quickly and effortlessly. Can you like freeze the tortilla, like store it for later?
You could, yes. I would recommend freezing them with like maybe a layer of wax paper in between them so they don't freeze together. But yeah, they would freeze. They're just like any other bread product. I mean, you're like you saw. I mean, it's just flour and baking soda, and they would freeze up just fine. And actually, probably after they're frozen, they might be a little more pliable. So that might make them so they would work for the burritos, because usually when you freeze something, it puts a little more moisture in it. So that might work out as well too. Try that and let me know how it works out, okay?
It looks, I mean, I am definitely impressed. It looks delicious.
And another really good thing about it too, I know we're all concerned about cost right now. That can of beans was 69 cents. Can of refried beans, you can usually get them for $1 a can. Not a big savings there, but that is way more when you add in. I mean, you mash it up, and it seems like it makes more than a can. And for the tortillas, I mean, most of the time you've already got flour, you've got the baking powder, you got everything you need to make these tortillas already in the pantry. So instead of going to buy some of the whole grain tortillas, you can pay upwards of $4 a pack for them. You've already got these ingredients in your pantry that you can make them up, and they're fresh, they're free. I mean, pretty much not free. You've paid for it, in the beginning, but it's not something you're going to have to go out and spend $4 for. And then if you can make as many as you need. I buy packs of 10 tortillas and maybe use 5 out of it, and the other ones go bad. So, and this is the way you can cater to your family's needs as well that way. All right, well, that's dinner for tonight. I hope everybody. I was pretty messy and it didn't go quite as planned, but I'm guaranteeing you make these at home, they will turn out really well. My first one, I just kind of flung it across the kitchen. You guys didn't see me. But the second one turned out really good. I'm going to eat it here in a second. So.
Yes, thank you so much. And I believe we have, let's see, a couple of more virtual
yes.
Lessons with you. And then the last week in March on Thursday, it's going to be in person.
In person at Northside, yeah. And I really hope that everybody can show up. And I mean, we have a lot of fun at the in-person classes, and I probably might be able by then, if it's warm enough outside. I think we may. I don't know if we're gonna have it outside or not. I know we're still not allowed to have food in the library, but I would love to be able to bring a sample to everybody to actually taste some of these things. So fingers crossed.
Yes, that's the best part about in person, is that you can actually take home some of the food. So,
yeah. So we'll have something there to make it a little more fun. So
definitely something to look forward to. But thank you so much.
All right, Rachel. Well, thank you. You have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.